It's time for Voice of Indie. Your hosts today are Beem Weeks, author, producer, and marketing monster for independent multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group, and Stephen Gies, author, producer, composer, and publisher for Fresh Ink Group.
And good evening and happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Voice of Indie podcast. This is episode number 81, and I am your host, Beem Weeks. And beside me over here is Mr. Stephen Gies, my co-host. How you doing tonight, Stephen?
I am just fine. Good to be back. We're enjoying springtime here. It's been in the 70s. Everything's blooming, sunny. Fish are starting to bite. Songbirds are singing. Nests are being built. We've got all kinds of birds moving in, which is cool. So this has been a lot of fun. So I celebrated springtime by going up to cold Indiana to see a Led Zeppelin tribute concert. Get the lead out.
Woohoo!
Played some of my favorite songs, No Quarter, and of course, if you play Ramble On, I'm yours. So had a good time. But I'm back enjoying the springtime again now. Wanted to mention that last week on the show I said NHT, Now Hear This, is the podcast that Mark Herndon's going to be on. Now Hear This is the company, the representation, and the show is called Now Hear This Entertainment.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to Mark Herndon's interview, he's already been on, and the interview is up. That's at nhte.net. Now Hear This Entertainment, nhte.net. And Mark Herndon is episode 421, and we are promoting the heck out of it already. So, if you can't remember that, check out Twitter, Facebook, all those Fresh Ink Group sites, and you'll find it there. And we're gonna really push this thing. So,
and if
listeners, go ahead.
If you go to that page, NHTE, it's at the top. So for the next week or so, it'll be the top one. Week after that, just scroll down to the next episode. So for a while, it'll be easy to find. It'll be at the top of the list. And then, a few months from now, you might have to scroll down a little bit. But he's also going to be on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and a whole bunch of other places, too. So look around.
Yeah. Listeners, if you want to take part in tonight's show, you can call in with a question or a comment for tonight's guest. You can get on Twitter and have a question or a comment over there, and here's how you do all of that.
Call 516-453-9902 right now and join us on air, or tweet us with the hashtag Fresh Ink Group in the body, and we'll read your comment or question live. That's 516-453-9902 or hashtag Fresh Ink Group.
Woo! Now, one of our perpetual bestsellers has become Sassy Discovers the AME Church, children's book illustrated by our staff artist, Anique, written by B.A. Johnson. She's out there really, really doing well, working with a doll company now, got merchandising things going, and this thing is really taken off. She's brought us the sequel. So we're starting on the artwork this week for the sequel to the Sassy book. That's going to be pretty cool. We've also picked up a new client this week, Janice Toney, who's got a 4-book Daddy Yo-Yo children's series that she illustrated herself. We're going to be publishing that pretty soon. And we're working right now on a new compendium of plays by Fresh Ink Group member J. Ash Looney called Practical Problems. So we got a whole bunch of cool things going right now.
And we also have now in pre-sale, the Ort Federation to the Stars, the second Ort Chronicle by Robert G. Williscroft. Dun, 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 to the stars and beyond. Robert G. Williscroft, he's out there, and this is a phenomenal series. So go over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you buy your books, and it's there for pre-sale, so go check it out. And if you missed an episode of this program, here's how you can find us.
If you miss a show, find us in the archives in the Fresh Ink Group channel on YouTube, on Spotify, or under the podcast tab at freshinkgroup.com, beamweeks.com, and stephengies.com. On YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. Stay on top of these podcasts and all things Fresh Ink Group with our weekly digital newsletter, new releases, videos, stories, excerpts, interviews, and more. Sign up now on the homepage of freshinkgroup.com and be the one who knows what's what.
What?
Now, if you're like me, one of those guys who sometimes finds himself standing in a room wondering why you came into this room, and it's not easy to remember that, nhte.net, watch next week's newsletter. We'll put a link in there for you. It'll take you right to that Mark Herndon podcast, too. So look for it in the newsletter. Man, there's so many reasons to subscribe to that newsletter. I just don't understand why not everybody in the world is subscribed to it yet. But we're getting there. The numbers are coming up every week. Speaking of numbers, I went over and took a look and see how the print editions of our Fresh Ink Group editions are selling this week. And number 1 and 2 slots, There Must Be Something in the Water. Anthology of the Fourth Generation, Descendants of Green Pond After the Emancipation. The hardcover is our number 1 bestseller so far this week. The softcover is number 2. And then this one, I just chuckle every time I see this, The Rise and Fall of a Construction Giant, The History, People, and Stories of CFW Construction, which was a construction company based in Fayetteville, Tennessee, that went out of business decades ago after corruption and scandal and deaths and suspicion and all kinds of malarkey going on there. And really, honestly, I thought that would be a regional book, and once everybody who ever heard of that company or worked for it or had anything to do with it got their copies, it would kind of fade a little bit. And the thing is resurging 5.5 years after we published this thing, almost 6 years after we published it. And it is surging and moved up to our number 3 print bestseller this week. Don't ask me to explain it. But here's another fun one. Moving up to number 4, young Ellie Collins's Miley in the Mirror, which is the second book in her Greek mythology series aimed at teenagers.
Yeah.
So go
Ellie.
Yeah.
Right.
And then do you recognize that number 5 book on the list there, Beem?
I sure do. Girl Wears Those Shoes by Jenny Wong. That's doing phenomenally well as well. So congrats to Jenny.
What else is doing well?
Continuing with the numbers, these archive episodes are doing stupendously well. From time to time, I go over there and just check the numbers and see what's doing what. And we're literally getting thousands of listens each month just in the archives. You know, we get, I don't know how many during the live shows, but in the archives, we're getting literally thousands of listens a month, and they're scattered out. And some of the ones that are doing quite well, episode 77, that was when Stephen gave a master class on point of view, writing point of view. That's doing extremely well. That's one of the most popular ones at this juncture. The aforementioned Jenny Wong, her episode 71, again doing really well. Abigail Hughini, we had her on here a few weeks ago, and her episode is still steadily pulling in listeners in the archive. Mark Herndon, whom we just spoke about, episode 52. Mark and his wife Leah C. Wright, they're doing quite well. Mary Schmidt, she was one of our early guests on there, episode 5. She's pulling in good numbers as well. And the G's and Weeks, one of the early ones, when Stephen and I talked a little bit about short stories, writing short stories, and I believe we even read some short stories. That's doing quite well. And there are other ones doing extremely well. The band Wide Track, they're a 2-time guest. They're pulling in huge numbers. Robert G. Williscroft, same thing. Verwayne Greenhoe, one of our regular listeners, the episode that we had him on, again, he's closing in on 1,000 listens just on his episode on our Fresh Ink Group site. That doesn't even count the Blog Talk Radio and the Spotify and all those other sites. He's closing in on 1,000 just on on the Fresh Ink Group site. So it's cool to see this, because we know that these archived episodes are really people are actually still interested in going and listening to them. So keep it up, listeners. Stephen?
Oh, I thought you were going to do the roll-in about Fig Publishing, but I got to agree. Keep at it, listeners. And if you've been a guest on our show, promote your own episode. Be shameless. Get out there and say the best podcast ever aired by anybody, anywhere, anytime is the one I was on, and here's the link. Get out there and promote it.
Exactly. That's what people are doing, too. I see Mary Schmidt promoting hers all the time, and that's why it's a steady growth in her numbers. I was going to hit that roll-in, and I got to talking, and I forgot to hit the roll-in. So there it is.
Go now.
Check out FreshInkGroup.com for everything publishing. Meet scores of authors. Discover hundreds of great books, plus audiobooks, podcasts, videos, trailers, free stories, free manuscript evaluations, and more. That's FreshInkGroup.com.
All right.
All right. So let's get to this week's guest. I've been excited to meet him. It's not somebody I've really talked to before or have known that much about. A longtime resident of Australia, A K Alliss, writes anytime, anywhere, sci-fi, fantasy, noir, cyberpunk, anything else that grabs his attention, breaking barriers from the mainstream genre tropes and introducing rich and intriguing characters to accompany readers on their adventure. Author of the Ouroboros cycle sci-fi saga, which includes Frame, Frame with the A in brackets, Future's Orphans and Gravity's Truth, plus the Pattern Codex science fiction epic, which includes All Dead Stars, and the domestic psychological thriller Kill Your Darlings. His next book is Jimmy Dean's Last Dance, coming from Spectrum Publishing. Now, I think I saw that on Amazon, so that might not be his next book. It might be his current book. Joining us live from where it's early morning in Australia, welcome, A K Alliss. Glad to have you.
Hey, Beem. Hey, Stephen. How you going?
Welcome, Adam. That's his name, so we will call him Adam, but he writes under A K Alliss. We are glad to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on the show. Really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you guys about the books.
Well, we got to talk about weather first. What's it like where you are?
Perth, Australia.
Well, we're Perth, Western Australia. We're just we're coming to the end of a very hot and oppressive summer. So I guess to put it into perspective for US listeners, it's about 90 degrees plus Fahrenheit. But for other parts of the world, it's in the low to mid 40s. It's nice to have a bit of cooler weather to help everything calm down a bit.
Mm. So are you from the Perth area originally? You've been there all your life? Where have you been?
No, I actually grew up. I grew up in a part of Western Australia called the Pilbara, which is, I guess, if you could liken it to anywhere, it's kind of like Arizona, I guess. Lots of mountains, or maybe Utah. It's got mountains, not much snow, obviously, but a desert and very kind of traditional outback, as you would imagine it. If you've seen Crocodile Dundee, it's sort of similar to that.
With the big toads. I love the big toads.
Now, Adam, as a writer, what kind of childhood did you have? Were you a reader and a writer when you were a kid, or is this something that came later on?
Yeah, well, the town that I grew up in was pretty heavily into sports, and I wasn't really an athletic kid. I was more of an academic kind of kid, so I spent a great deal of time in the public library and kind of cut my teeth on fantasy novels. So I was a pretty prolific reader when I was a kid. I did a lot of read a lot of stuff. I think my first book that I read that was sort of a bigger book was Magician by Raymond D. Feist. And then I've kind of progressed from there. But my mum was actually a really big reader as well, so I think I get it from there.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah.
Private school, public school?
Public school. Look, the town that I grew up in, Tom Price, is pretty small. It's got a floating residency of about 2,000 to 3,000 people at any one time.
Oh, wow.
And it's got two, I guess, what you call elementary schools, and then you've got the high schools you've got a high school there. But I actually I went to a thing called distance education, probably in, I guess, second year high school. And so I've had a bit of a mixed education, and I also went to boarding school for my last year of elementary.
All right. Before we ask about college, Beem, you want to take a look at Twitter over there? We got a couple of comments.
Yeah. Let's see. We will start with Berwayne Greenhoe. He said, "Good evening, Fresh In Group folks. It has been a day, but we're here and happy. Many haven't made it today. A big welcome to A K Alliss, and he says, let's giddy up and go." Welcome again, Verwayne.
Then we've got Dr. Helen Burrell. She says, from what I quickly accessed, A K Alliss is a multivariate talent whose fiction deserves serious attention. There's much more, but at least see only some of his wide-ranging creation here. And then she put a link there to Amazon and your information and your author picture and stuff. So Helen's out there helping promote you already. Yeah, good, Helen.
Thanks so much, Helen. Yeah. Really appreciate it.
And Verwayne, he comes back with another one. Fresh In Group. Shameless, I was lucky guest number 13. On what night? It was Halloween weekend.
I remember.
I had a great time, and I made a fool of myself. Just ask my wife, LOL. But your episode is performing very well, Verwayne, so you got that. You want to take the Willis-Croft tweet?
Yeah. I don't remember you making a fool of yourself, Verwayne, but if that gets some people to go listen to see what you're talking about, I'm all behind it. And then Robert G. Willis-Croft, he's at RG Willis-Croft over on Twitter. He says, welcome, Adam. I've got relatives in Hobart, Tasmania, and have visited up and down Eastern Australia, but have never visited Western Australia. Nevertheless, I love your country.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I'm a big fan of Tasmania and the East Coast in general. Some really nice parts of the country over there.
Ah, cool. So did you go to college?
Yeah. I did a bit of tertiary education. I've done some studies in psychology, sustainable development, and I've got some qualifications in auditing and quality management, and procurement and contract management. So not really. It's not really any one discipline, but I work mainly in quality assurance roles.
Cool. Beem, you want to go ahead and roll our first commercial? Start knocking a few out here. I think in honor of her moving up into the sales, maybe we could start with Ellie's Greek mythology series.
That's what we're going to do. Here's the Greek mythology series by Ellie Collins.
Hey, young adults. I'm author Ellie Collins. Check out my first 3 novels in my mythology series where Greek goddesses help us teens resolve problems from bullying to relationships. Now in print, digital, or audiobooks, with music and sound effects. Book 1 is Daisy Bold and Beautiful.
After a moment or two of silence, laughter filled the room, and students quickly began comparing notes on who had read the directions and who had fallen for the trick. DJ shared a smile with Hudson, as they both belonged to the Figured It Out group.
Book 2 is Miley in the Mirror.
Sam shot a cocky grin in Miley's direction. She didn't want him getting the idea she was fangirling on him or anything, and run the risk of future game invitations.
Mad Max and Sweet Sarah is the new 3rd book, so we're still producing the audiobook version. Go to freshinkgroup.com or your favorite retailer to learn more and order now.
Yeah. Now, Ellie wrote those books at the age of 11, 12, and 13.
Wow.
I believe she's 14 now. And she's expanding her oeuvre, including artwork and some other kinds of projects as well, too. So she's a very talented young woman. We're very proud to have her as one of our youngest authors, Fresh Ink Group members. And the videos for her books are over on YouTube. So go to the Fresh Ink Group channel, subscribe, like, share, tell your friends, cajole people into watching over your shoulder, and check out those videos for Ellie Collins' books, too.
Yeah. So, Adam, are you married? Do you have kids?
Yeah, I am. I'm very, very fortunate to be married to a wonderful woman who we've been together for about 10 years. And I think we're celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary next year. We have more than think. I know. We have a little girl. She's just coming up on 6 this year, and she's very, 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 very inquisitive and quite quick-witted as well. So, and then I have a 22-year-old from my first marriage, and she is she's doing really well. She's into visual arts, and she's got a bit of a creative streak like myself. So cool. And we're very close and keep in contact as well, and see each other quite regularly. So so it's so very, very lucky to have the full spectrum.
Yeah, that's was a question that I would have followed up. Do either of your children enjoy reading and writing or creativity? Because that seems to be a kind of a common thing with a lot of our guests, especially the writers. They'll have kids that are at least one kid. They might have 3 or 4 kids, and one of them's a writer. Same way with the musicians as well.
Look, they're both creative, but in different ways. My eldest is very much into visual arts. And design, whereas my youngest is more into dance and acting and performing, and she's very much into writing as well, and very much a storyteller. So they're different ends of the creative spectrum, but they're all both really, really talented and seem to just have a natural affinity for it. So.
Cool. So you have a day job then that's involved in quality control, or the things that you went to college for?
Yeah, so I'm a compliance manager for the Department of Health over here, which is obviously pretty involved with everything going on with the pandemic. So not so much on the clinical side, but on the corporate side. So I look after a lot of the back end of, are we compliant with legislation, and are we doing the right thing, and are we operationally compliant with international standards, and so it's a bit of investigative work, but also a lot of report writing, a lot of writing. So I find the creative side of things is kind of my outlet away from writing more corporate kind of material and content.
So how do you spend your free time when you're not working or writing? Do you have any hobbies, or like surfing or fishing or parachuting?
Yeah, look, I used to be into surfing when I was younger. I'm not so much now. I kind of wouldn't mind getting back into it, but it's funny you should ask that. I'm very much into video games. I love video games, mainly RPGs and adventure games and things where you have to kind of work out puzzles and they have a bit of a narrative to them, and so that's kind of my main hobby. Obviously, I love reading, but I'm also very much into. I love anything to do with sort of outdoors. Nature, used to be a big fan of hiking, and I went away from that for a really long time, and I guess in the last year, I've had a couple of changes in my life, and I really have been trying to look at opportunities to get back into that and get a bit more attuned with nature and a bit more in tune with the natural world and getting out in outdoors and doing things outdoors. So that's sort of where I'm headed, because obviously growing up in the Pilbara, really biodiverse environment, and I spent a lot of time roaming around in the outback and exploring and finding new things, and so it's really, really important to me to reconnect with that. And particularly, as I'm getting older, I realized that was something that was really, really important to me. So, yeah.
Is your part of the country been affected by the wildfires, which has been, a big effect on nature, obviously?
Not to the extent that the East Coast had. We do have that over here, and certainly in parts of Western Australia, there have been massive impacts from that side of things, particularly down south more recently. And a couple of years ago or last year, we had some fires to the east of Perth. And they're a lot more prevalent than they used to be. I think it's a problem that's not just Australia specific. I think it's a global problem now. I think you've seen wildfires in Greece and in California, and I think I think it's not just a Australia specific problem right now. It's something that seems to be happening more frequently.
Yeah, your country is producing the videos of the injured koalas, though, and that really gets a lot of people's attention and sympathy. That's kind of hard to see animals suffering like that.
Yep. Sorry, go.
Well, I started to ask, do you have any wild surfing stories? Because everybody I've ever knew who surfed has got at least one story, some crazy encounter, something.
I do actually have one story. Nothing to do with sharks, so as you would expect. But I was.
We'll take whales.
With two. No, well maybe I'm the whale, but I had two. I was out with two buddies, and we were surfing just at a local surf spot here in Perth, and there was a huge wave coming, and I used to be renowned for being overconfident. I think my confidence outweighed my abilities, and I decided to go for it. And then as I got onto the wave, I realized that it was probably beyond my capabilities, and I decided to try and get off it, which was probably my big mistake, because as I turned the board around, it scooped me up like the hand of God and slammed me against the reef. And I kind of had the board went out from under me, and it was on my attached still to my cord, but I was crawling over the reef, and I made it back to shore, and I crawled out, and I looked like a drowned rat, and I sat on a rock, and I had my head in my hands, and my wetsuit was torn, and then I could hear talking, and I looked up, and there was a cliff with like a outlook point above, and there were people up there taking photos of me sitting on the rock, looking very dejected. And I ended up with a massive bruise that went from probably just my mid back down to my lower thigh, and it went from this deep midnight black, purple, green, yellow, and every color in between, and it was probably one of the most defeated I've ever felt in my entire life. Like, I've never felt so dejected in my entire life. Completely rejected by the ocean, completely obliterated by the reef, and humiliated by having my photo taken. So it was one of those encounters that you don't want to repeat ever in your entire life. And my friends had a good laugh about it, and still to this day remind me of the time that I wiped out magnificently.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know the ocean rejected you, but it could have been worse, so it invited you back again. I mean, I used to be a hardcore recreational scuba diver, and there were a couple of my stories that might have ended a lot worse than they really did. And I always thought as well, if you got past that one, get out there and try again. So you might have been dejected for a minute, but what they were looking at was a picture of a guy who was gathering his courage to go back and face it again.
Yeah, if they knew what I was thinking, they might not feel the same way. I felt completely defeated that day. But I've got back out there, and it's look, I love the ocean. It's one of my favorite things, and I feel a deep connection to it. So it's definitely something that appeals to me.
Listeners, we've got guest author A K Alliss calling in live early morning out there in the Perth area of Australia. If you want to talk to them, ask a question, make a comment, call us, 516-453-9902. And we're going to roll another real commercial here real quick and then get back and talk to Adam Alliss some more.
Okay.
Determined to bring utilities and small building construction to rural areas, William R. Carter joined with Dick Fair and John Williams to form the CFW Construction Company in Fayetteville, Tennessee in 1952. Named for the partners, CFW expanded into building plants, roads, tunnels, bridges, and more. Within 40 years, the company grew to 5 offices, 14 subsidiaries, 1,000 pieces of equipment, and a proud workforce of more than 1,500 across a dozen states. Then came the scandals. By the end of the 20th century, CFW was gone, and the lives of everybody had changed. Dick Farrer's son was there for the best and the worst. He knows the history and people of Fayetteville, Tennessee, where he lives with his wife not 5 minutes from where CFW started on Pioneer Street, and 3 minutes from where it ended at 1824 Pulaski Highway. Now, he's written the definitive history, not just about a company, but a region and its people. With nearly 100 restored photos, most in color, Fair Jr. tells the true story, naming names and documenting the details. Get your copy now, and grab extras as gifts, in hardcover with dust jacket, or maybe a softcover trade edition. It's also available in all the ebook formats worldwide, including Nook, Kindle, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and more. The Rise and Fall of a Construction Giant is a keepsake, a historical record, the chronicle of an era, a compelling story told by the man at its center at the end. The Rise and Fall of a Construction Giant by Dick Fair Jr. is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group.
Right. Yeah, that's the surprise hit of the last 5 years.
International bestseller.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, you were talking about here for the water one. That's not loaded, so we can't play that one.
So how long have you been writing, Adam?
Yeah, so look, I've been writing for a long time. I started writing when I was in boarding school, so I was about 11, but it was mainly short stories and, little bits and pieces here and there, nothing really serious. Then when my first marriage ended, I started writing probably more seriously, but more of a journal to kind of put everything together and understand what had happened, and that turned into kind of the basis of my first book, which I put out in 2015. So I really remember someone saying to me that you need to write what you know, and what I found was that I'd started writing this thing and I'd stopped for a long time, probably about 10 years, I guess. And my wife found the book when we'd moved in together before we married, and she started reading it, and she got to the part where I'd stopped writing, and she was like, well, what comes next? And I'm like, you know what comes next. We got together and blah, blah, blah. She goes, but there's a whole gap in between that I don't know about, and I'm really interested to know. And I didn't really know what to make of that. I was like, well, what do I do? And so what I decided to do was I went back and I reread everything that I'd written, and I put it in more of a narrative format that started with the earliest and most significant memory that I had, and then I started doing it in these chunks of what's the next significant memory that I have, what makes me, and then I started writing a chapter every day, and I'd read her a chapter just before we went to sleep at night. And that was the way that I wrote the first book, A False History. I basically, so it's this sort of a semi-fictionalized memoir of my upbringing and how I got to meet my wife and everything in between, and it was also a really good way for us to get to know each other completely, or for her to get to know me completely, and I really what I found that book did was it gave me the courage to write fiction. It gave me the courage to write things that maybe I didn't have direct experience with, but I definitely had knowledge about. So then I went on to write Future's Orphans, which was kind of my first attempt at writing a book that touched on a lot of the stuff that I was concerned about in the world. It's a speculative fiction novel. It's set, 20 years in the future in Australia, and it's a sort of a proto-cyberpunk novel as well as a dystopian novel. And but I was able to take all these things that I was interested in about the world: technology, genetics, politics, commerce, finances, the way the world works, and smoosh it all together and make a sort of a bit of a noirish kind of cyberpunk / dystopian novel. And then that obviously has led into me being able to get into to audiobooks, because I met the owner of Spectrum Publishing, and she was really, really forthcoming in narrating that first book, A K Alliss Renee, and she basically she gave me that confidence as well that I could take my work to another level. So there's been a journey from about 2015 where I've slowly gained confidence as a writer that I didn't have when I first started out writing when I was a lot younger.
Have you noticed that your writing process has shifted a little bit from hearing a book in your head to hearing the audio book in your head while you're writing now? Yeah,
I would say definitely. Look, I've always been a bit of a cinematic writer, but particularly with Jimmy Dean's Last Dance, which is a multicast production, and I've got some amazing talent that, Johnny Heller and, Neil Helligers, Bill Lord, Joe Colucci-Lord, and again, A K Alliss Renee on there. Basically, I was really fortunate in having what I wrote as a really cinematic book, but as I was writing it, knowing that it was going to be narrated, I sort of had an impulse to lean more heavily into making the character voices stronger and making them a bit more realised than maybe I would have had prior to having audiobooks out there, and knowing what talented audio narrators and audiobook performance can bring to the story.
Yeah, I think that's right there is one of the focal points of being a good writer, is when you can actually hear the voices in your head, how the cadence of the voice, if there's an accent or whatever, but you hear it in your head and you can translate that to paper, and then you've got someone that comes along who's a voice artist who does it. I think that makes the writer a better writer as you go along.
Yeah, look, I definitely feel that what I learned from having that experience of having my books narrated, particularly the ones where I'd written them before I even knew that I was going to get them turned into audiobooks and have that opportunity, was that I felt that I learnt that you could use dialogue to tell the story as well as the spaces in between the dialogue. So a lot of use of grammar to indicate pausing, and a lot of choice of words in the dialogue as well, because when we're talking to people, we're continually thinking and positioning ourselves on what we're going to say and how we're going to say it. And I think that sometimes you don't realize that, or you don't quite think about that when you're writing dialogue. You just think, oh, well, they're trying to say something, but it's actually what they're trying to say without saying it sometimes.
Yeah, that's just kind of what I'm getting at. There's a cadence there. There's just, it's almost like, for me, writing dialogue is almost like I'm eavesdropping on a conversation, on a real conversation, even though it's taking place on my computer. that's what writing dialogue for me is that I'm listening to an actual conversation. So you got to hear that voice or voices as they would really speak, and not, so it doesn't come cardboard and stiff, and, there's a flow to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Yeah, there's a how-to ebook out there that talks about dialogue and cadence and how to use punctuation and accomplish a lot of those kinds of things that I highly endorse. It's called G's Writer How-To Dialogue, and was written by me. And you can certainly find that thing over on Amazon if you look up Stephen G's or G's Writer. And I know exactly what Adam's talking about there, because you can write the words down, but you've got to give your readers a whole lot of hints about how that character says those words.
Yes.
And the emotion, the attitude, as Beem said, the cadence and stuff like that. And the samples I've looked at of Adam's work, I like that. I appreciate the cadence in the dialogue, and you being able to hear the speakers. And you can hear them with an Aussie accent, or you can hear them without the Aussie accent. It's, whatever works for you.
Yeah, look, yeah. I know that in particular with the Ouroboros cycle, that sequence of novels is set in Australia. However, it could be set anywhere. It's not. There are markers in there that kind of give an indication that it's in Australia, but it's not an Australian-centric story. So the characters themselves, in particular, when Annalise was narrating Future's Orphans, there's a character in there with a particular dialect style that's I call Shakespearean ghetto. I came up with this idea that it was a street kid that spoke in the way that younger people would text in really short, truncated ways, but using slang, and it was really amazing to see that come to life through a voice artist's interpretation of it, because when I was writing it, I thought this is just going to sound ridiculous, but it actually was so moving, and so the way it was interpreted was just absolutely astounding. I couldn't believe that someone had taken what I'd written and turned it into this living, breathing thing that I just really hoped to experience. So.
Yeah, over on Twitter, Verwayne Greenhoe points out, my Audible books are doing exceptionally well lately. Perhaps the pandemic was good for something. I've sold 32 audio stories since the new year. So, that's it's good to see that you're in audiobooks, Adam, because it is the fastest rising publishing sector right now. People are really starting to embrace them. And, not to put two pitches back to back, but at Fresh Ink Group, we're producing audiobooks for many of our authors, and including music, sound effects, background noises. You heard an example or two in that commercial for Ellie's Greek mythology series. If the kids are laughing, we put laughing kids in there, and that helps bring those to life too. So audiobooks are hot, and A K Alliss has got some audiobooks out there that everybody should be checking out. Thanks for the comment, Verwayne.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking about effects, sorry, Beem. I think speaking about effects, in Gravity's Truth, that was one of the first books where I actually had audio effects put in. Kurt Bonham was the voice artist on that one, and it really does elevate the content when you have those effects. Like he used things like voice changes and. For more robotic characters, and even the sound of, mics, like people talking over mics. It was like actually sounding like they were coming through a receiver, and it was just incredible how much it lifted the content of the book.
So, yeah, we do have a caller. You guys want to take a call?
Yeah.
All righty. Hello, caller. Welcome to the show. You're on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Johnny Heller in New York City.
Johnny Heller.
Hey, Johnny.
This is the voice
of
guy.
How you doing, brother?
Welcome to the show, man.
I was told to call in. Is this a surprise?
Did you bring a bag of sound effects with you, too?
No, I'm totally against such things in audiobooks.
Well, why don't you kind of introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit something about you.
My name is Johnny Heller. I'm a pardon me, I'm a verklempt voiceover actor. I do a lot of audiobooks. I've done about 1,000. And I'm one of the voices in AK's Jimmy Dean's Last Dance. I play the narrator. I play Jimmy Dean. I play
Elvis.
So,
oh my.
Yeah,
and a
fine
Elvis
story.
you are indeed.
Thanks, my friend. It's it's an excellent. I don't know if you guys have read this. It's whether you read it or listen to it, you should. This is fascinating. It's a whole new. AK's created a new genre, I think, of I don't know, otherworldly, alternative history, fantasy, sci-fi, noir, thriller, humor. It's got everything, and it's really brilliant. It's a brilliant mind. And when you talk to AK, you have no idea that he's that smart. So it's kind of interesting.
I don't know whether that was a compliment or not.
That's a backhanded one. We call it backhanded.
Yeah, good on you. Well done, mate.
Thank you.
Well, you know, right now over on Twitter, we've got a question that would be good for both of you to answer. It's from Robert Williscroft, whose books we produce into audiobook forms too. He writes several series plus some other books as well, and he's asking, do you ever include accents, especially your own accent? By this, I mean actual indicating the accent by how you write the words.
Well, look, for me, I have tried it in the past. I did it with Jimmy Dean's, but then there was some discussion about whether the character would actually have that accent or not, and I kind of had to defer to people that lived in the United States because obviously being an Australian, we're fairly ignorant of the rest of the world. We just live in a little bubble down here. Just kidding. We're very well aware of world politics and the world situation. But yeah, look, I'd prefer to leave it up to the reader's interpretation. And I think, you know, given that Jimmy Dean's was alt history, I wanted to move away from deliberately making the characters sound stereotypically like what they do in pop culture. However, you know, I would put idiosyncrasies in there, like Elvis has a definite cadence to his speech, a definite, you know, catchwords that he uses or catchphrases that he uses. Maybe I'll pass over to Johnny to, because he's interpreted it into actually, you know, audio. What did you think, Johnny? Do you think that I lean into that accent or giving characters specific accents in the way that I write their dialogue?
I'm not sure, because the characters you wrote were, while in alternative history, they were still historical characters. So they have the accents they have. I mean, Elvis is from Tupelo, and Jimmy Dean has his a kind of a nasally kind of sound. So I think those characters are almost built in, because in audiobooks in general, you simply don't want to impersonate anyone. But in your book, it's pretty much a requirement to do, at least play. You know, but so it really depends. For the audiobook actor, the author is the director, the god. That's where you get your truth from. So however the characters are written by the author is how the actor has to play them. So if you have a if you're facile with accents at all, my mother's from London, so I grew up with a British accent, so you can do that thing. If you can do that, and that happens, and the actors and the characters from England or Ireland or Australia, wherever they're from, and you can do it, you need to do it. And if the author says, you know, he said such and such a thing with his lilting Irish, you know, with his Irish lilting accent, you have to at least give it a college try, because you've just been told. You can't say you can't say he said in his He-Man like voice, and you're doing a, you know, Wallace Shawn. You've got to you've got to give what's asked for.
It's a Wallace Shawn reference on the show.
Yeah. Well, the frame of reference is important. Yeah.
So
look.
Let's kind of back up for a second and kind of give a little, like a blurb, I guess, on Jimmy Dean's Last Dance, so everybody knows what it's kind of about.
Okay, so look, Jimmy Dean's Last Dance is set in an alt history, 1962, where Jimmy Dean never died. He never became famous. Elvis never became famous. And both of them are sort of involved in the underworld earlier on in 1957 down in Mexico, and they're working for the mob. And that's how they know each other. That's how they've kind of crossed paths. So outside of Hollywood. However, it does kind of dive into the politics and also the pop culture of the time. And so I haven't deviated directly from that. But essentially, something goes wrong in their job in 1957 and they have to go into hiding. And then 1962, Jimmy is kind of in LA and he's a bit part actor and he's working with Marilyn on her last film, and they become friends. And when she dies of apparent suicide, he doesn't believe it, and he thinks that something's up. So he gets in contact with his former partner, Elvis Presley, who has gone back to Tupelo, and Elvis reluctantly agrees to come out and help his friend as a sort of a way of repaying a debt, and then things escalate from there. But throughout the story, it's set in this very alternative 1962, where certain things in history haven't happened, certain things have, but the course of it's sort of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but a very strong detective noir story in the tradition of Raymond Chandler or Dashiell Hammett. So
cool.
would you say that's an accurate blurb, Johnny?
That's brilliantly. That's exactly what it is. Well done. Yes.
Yeah, there's the alternative history. That's kind of an interesting thing. There's a recent book, or a recent movie. I believe it was called Yesterday, where suddenly the Beatles never existed. There's that one guy in the world who knows every Beatles song.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty
interesting
thing. There was the real interesting part was when the guy realized that since the Beatles were never famous, John Lennon was never murdered. So he goes and finds John Lennon just to talk to him. And that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite scene in the whole book, in the whole movie. And I really had to think about who these people were, and I really wanted to lean into the removing the mythology. So stripping back everything that made these people Jimmy Dean or Elvis Presley, but retaining some of the things that might have happened to them. So Elvis still went into the military. He still learnt martial arts. He was still a hot-tempered kind of guy. He still, Jimmy grew up fairly without the involvement of parents. A largely character, but craving affection and contact with people, and a very intelligent individual, but also reckless as well. So I kind of wanted to strip back who these people were as they were presented in the public eye, and make them just genuine, everyday people. And what would they be doing?
Yeah, that's an interesting take there because, they are both legends. So, stripping all that stuff away, there would be parts of their personality that would still be the same, but then there would be all this other stuff that wouldn't exist. So that's a lot to think about when putting something together like that.
That book is for sale now?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on a heap of places actually. It's like Barnes and Noble have got it, and it's all over the place. It's in hardcover, paperback, ebook, audio. I'm really, really fortunate. Spectrum really supportive in putting it out there in all these different formats. Obviously, Johnny and the crew are on board, and I think the thing that really got me was. And I guess this is a question for Johnny. When you're doing the voices and when you were bringing those characters to life. Did you deliberately think about disconnecting from who they were in pop culture, or did you sort of, was there any point where you kind of went, well, these are not the same, this is not Elvis and this is not Jimmy Dean?
Oh, I think, yeah, you have to, because they are. I mean, I watched, I've seen all of Jimmy Dean's movies, and I've actually seen all of Elvis's movies. So, I mean, it wasn't hard for me to find anyone. And I did go online and listen to them both a little bit to get down their syntax, because, you don't want to be an impressionist so much as you want to be an actor. But, it's not the same Elvis, and he doesn't have the same, this particular Elvis in Jimmy Dean's Last Dance is not going to die of a drug overdose on a toilet seat. It's not going to happen. The Jimmy Dean character may indeed well die in a car crash after the story, because he's far more trouble than Elvis. Elvis is just this handsome, decent fellow who gets laid a lot, but has a pretty good moral compass, and I could see him carrying on. But Jimmy Dean's got a lot of issues, in this book, and I'm much more familiar with the life and times of Elvis, just because I followed it when I was a kid, than I was life and times of Jimmy Dean. So, but we know Jimmy Dean. I don't know all his troubles. But yeah, I was certainly aware of who they were, and I think you had to bring in the world's understanding of these characters. You had to at least give a nod to that, but you had to also give a nod. This is an alternative universe where all the things you know about either one of them isn't exactly the case. Yeah, and you had to be open to the chance that these guys have a different mindset, a different direction, different goals, and a different path and a different role to play.
Yeah.
Well, you sold me on it, because I think after this show, I'm going to probably go over to Amazon and grab a copy.
Sounds fascinating, yeah.
No, go to Audible and
Excellent.
download it. Yeah.
Go to Audible. All right, I go to Audible.
Get the audio book.
All right.
The book's actually subpar. The audio book is much better.
I'll do that. I'll go grab the audio book.
Yeah. Listeners, we have Australian author A K Alliss on. We've got and he's from Australia, calling from Australia. We've got voice actor John Heller calling in from New York. And we're going to play our last commercial here real quick, get back talking to these fascinating gentlemen.
Now, from science fiction master Robert G. Williscroft, the Oort Federation, to the stars, the second Oort Chronicle. As the Oort Federation becomes a major force in the solar system, Braxton Thorpe passes the Federation chairmanship to former U.S. President John Butler. Thorpe's group offers humanity virtual immortality, but Isidore Orlov and his Udachni enterprises oppose their every move. While Thorpe's group terraforms Mars for more living space, the Mars Reds prove formidable as resistors. If the Asterian Starship fighter pilots are released, will they align with Phoenix or Udachni? And who will develop the right FTL technology? In this tense space adventure, Thorpe, his team, and Max the Tabby Cat travel to Proxima Centauri and beyond to the Astor system, 84 light years distant. Will Thorpe bring together humans and Asterians in their quest for intergalactic travel? Will long life prove more than mere humans can handle? Grab Icicle, a tensor matrix, the first Oort Chronicle, and continue the journey with the Oort Federation to the stars. Proudly published in all print, digital, and sensory-enhanced audiobooks by Fresh Ink Group.
Ooh,
right.
Sensory enhanced. I wonder who made that phrase up.
All right, we have a comment over here on Twitter as well here. Robert G. Williscroft, who we just heard about his book there, he says, in writing my book Slingshot, I needed to present one character's dialogue as Scottish brogue. I found a website that would translate normal English into Scottish brogue. It gave my spell checker fits.
Oh, I'll bet. John, do you have some Scottish brogue for us?
I can do Scottish brogue for you, but here's the thing. I think I did Irish. I made a mistake. Sorry, but I don't know that. It'll take me a second to get it. I will tell you one thing. I'm doing a lit RPG book right now, and the only rule I was given was that any dwarfs have to be Scottish.
Scottish dwarf.
Great dwarfs are Scottish. So, but I don't know if so just watch some Scottish TV and do it. The idea of getting the voice switched through AI is something that every actor in the universe would be against. So I know yours is probably a more author-based podcast or blog, but I know that from an acting standpoint, we are dead set against using, finding a voice and having it switched to Scottish via some machinery.
Yeah.
So we're humans, and I think it's a human art, and humans should do the work.
Oh, I believe that too. Definitely.
Unless you want your toaster reading your books, yeah.
So,
yeah,
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just talking about. It's funny, Johnny mentioned AI. That's kind of one of the things that was really in the back of my mind when I was writing Ouroboros Cycle, the impact of AI and what an AI would be like, and what impact it would have on the world if there was one single AI that was like an overarching AI, I guess, and it is an interesting take, because how much humanity does it actually take out of us? How much, and I think the thing that I looked at was free will. Like to what extent does free will play a part when you've got someone dictating how something should be? And that's I guess, look, the world being the world, we have enough trouble with that with humans, let alone a computer-generated thing. So it's interesting to talk about AI. That's for sure.
Well, I think we learned anything from Bruce Willis films is that if you start bringing in AI, eventually your vacuum will kill you. So
for sure. Yeah.
So do you want to pitch Kill Your Darlings while you've got some airtime?
Yeah. Look, I wrote Kill Your Darlings as part of the NaNoWriMo, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And it started out. I really wanted to I'd written these novels that essentially were set in the future, but they were noir detective novels, and they had the characters were all very noir centric. But I really wanted to try my hand at writing a book that was sort of similar to a more commercial novel that was sort of similar to what's that one by Gillian Flynn, Gone Girl. Yeah. So I wanted to write a book that was sort of like my attempt at Gone Girl, and what I didn't really know how to approach it. So I had this idea that it's this author, and he's become wildly successful with his first novel, which is obviously every author's dream. So it's a little bit of wish fulfillment. But then he's really struggling to write his second novel. And then just as he completes his manuscript, it goes online, and then he goes missing, and his wife is and his wife is this very emotionally troubled person, and a detective starts investigating it, and as this detective is investigating it, she discovers that there's more to the wife than it seems, and then I can't really give too much more without giving away the twist in the plot, because there is a twist. But it was kind of my attempt to write this very commercial kind of mystery novel, and it sold really well. So I think there's something to it. But it didn't become a bestseller or anything, but it was definitely one of my better performing books, and I think I think what it says is about readers in general is that people like to guess. Readers don't like to be fed things. They like to work it out themselves. And I think that leans into that rule about show don't tell, which I don't always agree with, but I definitely think there's an element that that readers really like to put the pieces together themselves. They like a certain degree of spoon feeding, but they do like that element that what's going to happen next. Can I work it out before I'm actually told?
Is Kill Your Darlings also audiobook?
No, that's actually not on audiobook at all. So I don't know why I've never put it on audiobook, but I personally really struggled writing it. It's not my typical thing that I would write, and so hats off to the people that can write mystery novels really easily. It wasn't an easy process for me at all. It was really, really challenging.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's always a good thing, for a writer to treat your readers with the respect and the dignity of letting them figure things out instead of, spoon feeding it to them. Because, as you said, readers want that. That's I'm a reader as well as a writer, and the books where everything's spelled out, you see it coming from a mile away. They're not my cup of tea, I guess.
Yeah. John, can we put you on the spot and ask, do you have any advice for authors out there who are interested in getting into audiobook versions of their work?
Sure, put me on the spot. Here's what I think. You write whatever you write. Your job is to come up with the ideas and see the scene and write it out. And our job is to hopefully see what you see and share that with the listener. So try not to there are some authors who try and screw with us. Literally, they try and mess around, have change the voices or change things. Just try to. I mean, I think what you need to think about if you want your book to go into audio is that the act of reading is something of a cinematography kind of feeling. Every time you read a book, you're really seeing a film in your mind. And I think that if the author would write with that idea in mind, what is the scene structure? What's the arc of the scene? What do we see? If I'm a cinematographer, what are my words showing the listener or the reader? And think in terms of that as a film, kind of, and I think you're going to be right in tune with what the audiobook will need to play.
Oh, good.
Fantastic. Adam, do you have any advice for up-and-coming writers or even seasoned writers?
Yeah, look, I guess my advice is this, right? When I went into writing novels, I had this expectation that I probably wouldn't, become a Stephen King or a really commercial writer or anything like that. But I definitely felt that. I definitely feel that you need to go in with no expectations. You need to, don't write something that you think people want to read. Write something that write it for the reader, but definitely write what you want to write. I stand by that because the impulse sometimes is really overpowering to write a really commercial novel and write to market or whatever. And if you want to do that, fine, go ahead and do it. If that's what you want to do. But as long as it's what you want to do and not what you think you should do, if that makes sense. Because for me, I would rather write for the joy of writing and because it's something that I'm passionate about and that hopefully comes through in my writing, than I'm writing because I think it's going to be a number one bestseller or whatever. I really want to write stories that are interesting, unique, vibrant, powerful, emotive. Because that's why I started reading. It was an escape for me. It helped me. It helped me exit from the very bland kind of life that I had growing up, where I grew up. In a small country town, and it took me to places that I never thought I'd ever go. And the writers that did that for me were the writers that were so passionate about their work, and you could tell that they were passionate about their work. Like one of my favorite authors is William Gibson. Yes, he's a very, very well-known commercial author, but he writes with such poetry and such passion, and his words are tangible, and you can feel it, and they're not easy. It's not an easy read, but it's rewarding, you know, and that's kind of the writer that I aspire to be anyway. So I don't know whether that's good advice or bad advice, but that's the advice that I keep for me.
Well,
Works for me.
That's excellent advice. I'm doing a print interview with a blog, and today I was answering some of the questions on there, and it was dealing with that right there. My answer was that I write what interests me, and I know that what interests me, there's going to be other people out there that are going to be interested too. So as long as I'm writing it and I'm happy with it, as you said, you don't come into this looking to be the next Stephen King. You come into it looking to, write something that you enjoy, and hopefully other people will enjoy it as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our caller today has been voice actor John Heller, who does audiobooks, among other things, and has done some work with... You must say
Johnny, if you don't mind.
Johnny? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm about to ask you to spell it, and tell us how people can find you, get a hold of you, and track you down, send you a message, maybe even talk to you about some work.
I've cleverly named my website www.johnnyheller.com. So that's, I think it should be easy. I'm all over the place. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm everywhere.
A lot of ways to spell Johnny. What are we looking for?
JohnnyHeller.
Right. Okay.
Johnny
Heller, voice actor, and you can also find.
He's all over the internet. You can't miss him.
Yeah, you can also find that credit on Jimmy Dean's Last Dance audiobook, which is a good reason to buy the audiobook so you can get the credits, right?
Yes.
So, same question for you, Adam. How do people find you, contact you? What are your handles on social media? Where do we hunt you down? Which way do you walk when you come out the front door?
Well, backwards usually because I'm locking it. And you can find me on www.AKAlliss.com. I'm also at Duke_Crowbait on Twitter, or A K Alliss. You can probably find me. Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, pigeon carrier. But yeah,
you're old school.
But I'm all over the internet. I'm shameless, so we'll work for food.
Yeah, good. Well, it's been great talking to you, gentlemen and listeners. Remember, get out there to nhte.net and find that Mark Herndon, Country Music Hall of Fame drummer, Alabama drummer Mark Herndon interview on Now Hear This Entertainment, nhte.net. And make sure you subscribe to our newsletter so you can find out next week's podcast guest will be author Patricia A. Guthrie. And then on March 16th, who do we have, Beem?
We have author D. Ike Horst. And he's a Missouri writer, so he'll be in here on the 16th.
All right. And then March 23rd is the big, very special episode, Crossovers. JC and RP Carter's video podcast is going to be featuring me, Stephen G's, as their guest. And then the second that show ends, we're going to go click, 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 and welcome you to this show. And Rob and Joan Carter will be our guests on the Voice of Indie podcast that night. That's March 23rd. It's a big day. And then after that, Beem?
And after that, we have Dee Wallace Peach. She will be in here on the 30th. She's an author. She's got a whole lot of books out there, and she's quite talented. So I'm looking forward to having her on the 30th.
Yeah. It's been fascinating talking to you, Johnny Heller, and A K Alliss, Adam Alliss. We really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, good time, Adam
and
Johnny.
Guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd just like to also say thanks very much to Spectrum Publishing for organising this interview. I really appreciate the connecting up, and also to Johnny for joining me on the show. I really appreciate you joining me, Johnny.
My pleasure, my friend. My pleasure. You're a great man.
Yeah.
And
with the thing with Spectrum Publishing reaching out, that's a cool idea. Some of you authors who have publishers, you want to reach out as get your authors on this show. This is how you do it. Reach out to us, and we're always looking to fill each week. So keep that in mind.
Okay, the author is A K Alliss. Look for his books everywhere. Look for his audio books, e-books, hardcovers, soft covers, scratch and sniff, you name it, he's got it out there.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, again, thank you for joining us. We'll see everybody next week. Have a good evening and afternoon and wherever you are.
You've been a part of Voice of Indie, a production of Fresh Ink Group. Spread the word, support our guests, then find us at freshinkgroup.com and be sure to hashtag Fresh Ink Group.